This is the third week of 4 where we as a church family want to turn our attention on what we say we care about as a church family and what we want to do together as a church family. So we arrange the chairs differently. If you haven't been here until this Sunday, you'll notice that, so that you can see each other, because this is a series about us. It is not just, that's right, and you can make faces at each other, and that's right, exactly. And this is really the start of what's going to be a conversation and a planning process that takes much longer than April, but this is the way that we're kicking that off. This is a lot about information gathering for us, and then also laying out some of the key principles that will guide us as we go forward as a church family. So today, let's return again to this passage in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22. This passage, if you're a part of the RiverTree family, is very familiar to you, but in this case, familiarity is a good thing, because, as you'll find in this passage, as you know from this passage, Jesus says there's really nothing else more important for you as a human being to remember than these two things that he talks about in this passage. Last week we talked about the first great commandment, what Jesus says is the single greatest thing that any human being can do. And this week and next week we're going to talk about the second great commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself. Historical note here, this kind of question was asked quite a bit. It was wrestled with in churches of Jesus' day called synagogues, and different religious leaders had different answers to the question of what's the most important thing that God has told us that we need to make sure that we obey or apply in our lives. And actually what Jesus does here that is unique, that no one else before him or after him in first century Judaism did, is he gave a 2-command answer to the question that he was asked, and nobody ever put these 2 commands together the way that he did. To love God fully and to love your neighbor as yourself. You know, if you were to ask people in America today, in churches today, gathered all over the country this morning, what does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to follow Jesus? You might get a bunch of different answers, right? Well, it means you believe that Jesus died for your sins. But what does that phrase mean? Well, you believe that Jesus rose from the dead and therefore will have you rise to new life after you die as well. Okay. You believe that Jesus was the Son of God. Okay. You believe that the Bible is true. Okay. Let me suggest to you that if these 2 commandments are at the front of how you define what Christianity is, then you're not defining it Jesus' way. Because Jesus said these are the 2 most important things that anybody who claims to follow him or any human being can care about. So to be a Christian means that we together and you say, yes, I know the best thing I can do in my life. I know the thing that will bear the most fruit in my life. I know the thing that will help me grow the most in life. I know the thing that will help me lead a purposeful and meaningful life. I know the thing that will keep me connected to God in life singularly is I will love him fully with everything that I have, and I will love my neighbors as myself. This is Jesus' definition of what it means to be a follower of his. And we shouldn't soon lose that in how we think of what it means to be a Christian. Jesus is taking the second great commandment, by the way, as we have talked about once before in the life of our church, directly from the Old Testament. Just like the first great commandment is directly from the Old Testament. From this kind of obscure passage in a book that nobody ever wants to read in the Old Testament, Leviticus. And there in this list of how the ancient Israelites were supposed to treat one another as friends and countrymen right there at the end. God, sometime around 1500 BC, gives what Jesus will later call the second great commandment. What's your definition of church? How do you think other people define what it means? You have lots of friends who go to church, no doubt. When you ask them, where do you go to church, what do you think they mean in their response to you? Odds are, because of the way that we as Americans think of church and conceive of church and practice church, many of the people that you would ask, where do you go to church, are going to respond by telling you where they choose to attend worship services on a Sunday morning. Or if they want to go on Saturday night, a Saturday night. It has to do with worship. It has to do with songs. It has to do with finding a compelling, charismatic teacher of the Scripture that they think feeds them in a way that they want. This is what defines church for many people. Here in a place that is historically Christian, for a lot of people, church is the place where my family has always gone. And there are churches in West Michigan that are defined by generation after generation of family going to the same church. It is, in fact, what makes that church go. They are family-oriented churches. Nothing wrong with that. But if you were to ask people, what is church to you, it's that. It is this family network that has gone together for generations in the same building called church. This morning, I would like to suggest to you that we need to define it Jesus' way. The most basic way that Jesus defines church in his two great commandments is that a church is a group of people who are committed together to loving God fully and passionately, and they are committed to being each other's neighbors. So when you see each other and you see the faces and the names here that you know, fundamentally what you see is a group of people who say, we will be each other's neighbors. And that is in a world, and in a country especially, where we tend to live fairly neighborless. You have family, you probably have only a few, close friends. You don't have a lot of neighbors. Well, I know you live in a neighborhood, and you have people who live in your neighborhood, and you have houses across the street or houses next to you, but our relationships with those people don't tend to be very neighborly. They may be cordial, we may borrow each other's snowblower on occasion, but I don't know that it's too terribly neighborly. Certainly not in the sense that Jesus talks about it, which is that we are to love our neighbors the same way that we look after ourselves. Well, no. My relationship with my physical neighbors doesn't look like that. So in this neighborless country, church is a group of people saying to each other, we will be neighbors for each other. We will look after each other. We will live next door to each other in our lives. We may be separated by a town or two, but we will choose to take up residence next to each other in our lives. This is what church is. And to be as specific about it as Jesus was, church is a group of people saying to each other, we will be each other's neighbors, and I care about your needs and your life as much as I care about my needs and my life. If you think about that, oftentimes, for me as a person, the only people in my life that I say that about are my family and my close friends. There's probably a list of 10 people or less in my life that if I were honest, I treat in a way that I care about their needs and their well-being as much as my own. And that's on a good day, because on my bad days, I don't care about anybody's needs as much as I care about my own. The audacity of church, the boldness, the spiritual courage of church is that a group of people looks at each other and says, yeah, we're going to take up residence in each other's lives. We're going to live together. We're going to be next door to each other. And moreover, I don't just care about what I get out of this. I care about what you get out of this. I don't care about whether or not this is good for me only. I care about whether or not this is good for you. I don't care if I'm going through just a great season of life with success and growth. I care whether or not you do. Church is a group of people who say, we will be neighbors to each other. It is no less than that. That's what we have said we want to be. But maybe now you appreciate the fullness and the depth, the extent of what that means. The height to which we aspire as we say to each other here, we will be each other's neighbors. Very early on, Jesus comes, preaches this message of loving God and neighborly love toward each other. Then he is crucified, is resurrected, and then ascends back to heaven. And the very earliest followers of Jesus, who had this beautiful, simple message of this remarkable Messiah written onto their hearts, started to be church together. Early in the history book in your New Testament of the earliest church, the Acts of the Apostles, we are told what it looked like for them to begin to live out Jesus' message toward each other. It looked like this. It looked like them being devoted to one another and to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, which is a Christian word for relationships and closeness, to prayer, to generosity, to meeting together, eating together, enjoying one another with glad and sincere hearts, earning the respect of those on the outside of the Christian movement, and seeing God add to their numbers day by day. Here's the connection I want you to make this morning. In this also very well-known passage about what church looked like and acted like for the earliest Christians. Those things up on the screen from Acts chapter 2 are the behavior of neighbors. These earliest Christians accepted, took on as their own the lessons of Jesus, who said, love God fully, love each other like family, love each other like neighbors, care about each other as much as you care about yourself. And so with that message knit in their souls, ringing in their ears, they started to be church together. And for them to be neighborly to each other looked like them doing this. So if you and I wanted to be a neighborly kind of church to each other, and we say that's what we want to be, then we would do these things too. Everything in that list from Acts chapter 2 is a neighborly act. Every one of them. Think about that. One of the things we're told in Acts chapter 2 is that they were devoted to prayer. Prayer is a neighborly act. Because prayer is not just for me. Prayer is me doing something for you. We lift up one another and support one another in prayer. Is there any greater spiritual act of neighborly love than me caring enough about you to pray for you? Probably not. They were devoted together, we are told, to the teaching of the Scripture and to those who gave that teaching to them, the apostles. How is that neighborly love? Well, if you remember from last week, if you were here, it's because all of us by nature are spiritually forgetful. We need to be reminded. And then we need to be helped by others to take the message of Christ and to use it in our life to change who we are and to change our relationship to the others in our lives. You can't do that alone. You will never grow as much or learn as much in isolation as you will with other people on whom you rely to give you insight and wisdom that you could never get on your own. To be devoted together, collectively, to the apostles' teaching, to the scriptures, that's an act of neighborly love. You may have never seen it that way before. Being generous to one another. They gave out of what they had to meet the needs of others. That's very overtly an act of neighborly love. Sacrificial love, where I care for the needs of someone else as much as I do myself. They ate together. They praised God together. They enjoyed each other's company. They met together in their homes for meals. They just loved being around together. My favorite quote from that passage at the end of Acts 2 is that they met together and were together and related to each other in their homes with, here's the quote, glad and sincere hearts. Just being together lifted them up. Just being together was one of the greatest joys that they could ever have. They loved each other. They uplifted each other. They encouraged each other. They were neighbors to each other. And as the watching world looked at the earliest church, they couldn't help but be amazed. And we are told explicitly at the end of Acts chapter 2 that the watching world looked at these first Christians and that those first Christians were held in very high esteem, not by each other, but by those outside the movement, because they practiced this kind of neighborly love toward each other. The world was amazed. And the end result at the end of Acts chapter 2 is that people came to faith in Jesus, committed their life to Jesus, committed their life to his message of loving God fully and loving neighbors as much as you love yourself. They devoted themselves to it. They found in it the freedom and salvation that they had always sought. And it's because they saw the first Christians doing it. This, in Acts chapter 2, is what a church practicing neighborly love looks like. So, think to yourself, we're a church who says we care a great deal about Jesus' second great commandment. I wonder how we're doing on that Acts chapter 2 checklist. What do you think we do well on it? What do you think our strengths on that list are? What aren't they? What do you think we can do better at? Some of the things should leap right off the list at you. We as a church over the last 5 years have taken steps to prioritize in our own budget and in our own handling of our money that we will always have money set aside to be generous to each other. This is already something we do as an act of neighborly love. We find from you and the things you have already told us, and we'll get more into this next week, that one of the great strengths of who we are as a church is when we gather in places and in groups and in settings that aren't the Sunday morning worship service. Our small groups, our groves, our studies, these are really the fuel that drive our church. You love being together. You are very much the kind of neighborly love that you see in Acts 2. What do we do well on that list for you? What do we not? This is the bar, except no less. Every time our church gathers, in its large gathering like this on a Sunday morning, in your grove or small group gathering, you should ask yourself, is this what we're doing together? Are we praying for each other as an act of neighborly love? Are we reminding each other of the Scriptures and trying to learn them a little bit more and apply them to our lives a little bit more together when we gather? Maybe. Are we people, when we gather, both in large and small settings, that we practice generosity to each other? Do we do that? Do we enjoy each other? Do we just like being together, maybe over a meal like those first Christians, and does it make our hearts glad? If you're a part of our church, here's what I'd tell you. Don't accept any less than this. And I mean that about what we do now on Sunday morning, but when you gather as a group. We want to help you experience this when you gather in all the different forms that RiverTree takes. And part of the journey that is starting this month is that we want this kind of neighborly love to define us. And you will help us figure out how to do that really well. Because some of what you see up there we do well, and some of it we don't. And it's okay to admit that. Just like as an individual Christian, there are probably some things up there on that list that you do really well and some of the things that you don't. If we wanted to care most about what Jesus says we ought to, then we would see that as a church, who we are is choosing to be each other's neighbors. We are choosing to be each other's family, which is why in the earliest Christians called each other brother and sister, mother and father. We are the family that we choose. Just a couple of quotes here before we do a little sharing together. In a great book about neighborly focused spirituality written recently, this author rightly connects, as Jesus did, these two great loves that every Christian should have, love of God and love of neighbor. According to this author, just like Jesus said 2,000 years ago, you can't separate the two. It is impossible for a Christian person to say, yeah, I love God, I believe in God, but I am disinterested in my neighbors. You can't do that. 1 John in your New Testament on several occasions says the very same thing. Love is from God, therefore, if you say you love him, you will love the people around you. If we are going to be a church that loves God deeply, it is going to show in the way we are devoted to each other as neighbors. And I love this from an author named David Benner, who is a great Christian psychiatrist, does a lot of spiritual direction work with people and spiritual retreats, because it talks about love in such a profound way. But you can really only appreciate what he says about the role of love in your life when you think about it practically and concretely. As I read these two quotes to you, just remember, this is not about the concept of love. You will only experience what David Benner describes here when you actually practice love toward the people that are already in your life. In this case this morning, the people here, the people who call our church home, where we choose to be each other's neighbors. Benner writes that when we choose to be neighbors to each other, that kind of love reconnects us to life. The truth of Christ's life is that life is love and love is life. There is no genuine life without love. Self-interest suffocates life. The only way to truly care for myself is to give myself to others. He continues, love is the fulfillment of everything that makes us human. The point of being human is to learn love. We are more or less human insofar as we are in the school of love. We are more human the more we love, and we are less human the less we love. Yeah. Did you know that's what we are attempting to do for each other? That is the opportunity that we have together. We are giving each other the chance to be more human because we choose to be each other's neighbors. We are choosing to give each other the chance to be full of God's own kind of life because we're choosing to be each other's neighbors. This is what you and I can do together if we choose to be neighbors to each other. Now, I think that this is something that many of us have experienced. I think that you, over our last few years together, have seen what we talked about today play out in your own life or in the life of our church. So I'd actually like you to take a minute, and as we do in every week of this series, we're going to talk to each other. You don't just have to listen to me. You tell me, what has it looked like for us to be each other's neighbors, to care about each other as much as we care for our own lives, our own jobs, our own mortgages? How have you experienced that? What do you hope happens next? Where do you think we can go next? How can it grow next? How can we take this great strength and continue to fan the flame so that it gets bigger? Who would share a story? Who would share an experience or an insight about what it looks like for us to be a church of neighbors to each other? Will you pass that back to Chris, Russ?
Hey, so when the list was up, the thing that popped out to me most was earn the respect of the unchurched. Now, coming from the church that I grew up in, that statement would have never existed on that board in that manner. And that mentality and that mindset is the reason I'm here. And it's the reason I'm up there singing. Because without going back into my past too much, I have been at many churches where if you're not the type of Christian they expect you to be, you're not shown respect, you're not shown love, you're not viewed at as a neighbor. And that was the thing that told me this was the place for me. So it means the world to me that that is a focus and that is something important here.
It is. Thank you, Chris. It is. You're going to get the report from me next week, but I'll go ahead and tip my hand a little bit. One of the things you identified about yourselves, you know, one of the 4 greatest strengths you said RiverTree has is that. Not that you're just a friendly group, not that you're just a warm group, but that you are an accepting group. That was the word. You are an accepting group. And you recognize that you are a motley crew, an odd bunch, eclectic and diverse. God love you, you deserve me as your pastor, because that's kind of me. But I'm going to quote from one of the people who identified this strength of our church. He said, quote, you know, sometimes you get the impression that it's West Michigan, people can go to church all kinds of places. There's lots of choices. He said, for me, that's not true. He said, there are not a lot of places that I can go to church, for probably some of the reasons that Chris said. But he said, I can come to church here because you love me for who I am, and not everybody does. That's who you are. That's what it looks like for you to be neighbors. Very good. Somebody else?
Okay, I'll talk. Here we go. So,
Thanks, Wayne.
you guys have been in my church and my neighbors, even if I'm a few hundred towns away. So I love that about you guys, and I know Ben and Kayla are going to be leaving soon, and we're going to be their neighbors, even they're going to be a few hundred or thousand towns away. So, amen to that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Somebody else? How have you experienced church as neighbors? Because that's Jesus' definition. Church is a group of people committed to being each other's neighbors. Have you? All right. Thank you, Chris.
And I don't know if I've ever talked on a microphone before. But anyways, I've shared this with my small group already, and it's good that I shared with them before I shared with everybody else, because I get really nervous talking to a group. So I just wrote it all down, and I'm going to read it, so I hope you don't mind. And anyways, this all started over about a year ago, and I'd been praying about something that I could do, a project that God would help me find so I could help someone. Anyways, during this time, an old customer of mine from the gas station called me up and said, "You want to go out to lunch?" And I was like, "Sure, no problem, that'd be fun." And then after we had lunch, we said, "Well, let's stay in touch." Anyways, she started stopping by my house and calling me on the telephone and keeping in touch. And I'm not really very good at that kind of stuff, so it was like kind of nice. But then I was trying to get her to let me come over to her house, and she kept putting it off until about the end of September. And then she said, "Why don't you just come over once?" So when I walked into her house, it was just like, holy cats. It's like the show Hoarders, you know, you couldn't even walk in there. And I said, the first thing I said was like, "Wow, we got to take care of this problem." And she was like looking at me like, so I get some bags and start throwing stuff away, you know, because that's what I do. I'm just like a get her done kind of person. So after that, I was there for like 4 hours that day, and I said, "Well, let's make a plan, and I'll come over every Thursday, and we'll get this straightened out." And she kissed me on the cheek, and she said, "I know it was Jesus that sent you to me." And I said, "Whoa, this is like crazy." So anyways, I've been going there ever since the beginning of October every week. I've got about 100 hours in this project now, and I don't consider her a project anymore. I consider her one of my friends. Anyways, I got to see where I am here because this is all crazy. Anyways, I say we both have benefited from our time together because we both have some really bad things in our past that are exactly the same. So we've been able to sit and talk all of this stuff through to get it all straightened out, you know, and that's good. Anyways, here's the good news. I just moved her back into her bedroom this week. After all this time, she's been sleeping on the couch for years and years because she couldn't get into her bedroom. Can you believe it? Anyways, I just wanted to tell you guys this so that you can see how the Holy Spirit really works in everybody's life.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jen. You did great. Thank you. Maybe one more. Share with each other what it's like to try to be a church committed to being each other's neighbors. And think of, like, this is what we've done, this is who we've been, and what could be. So much of this is going to be an ongoing process of us learning to do this better, to do it practically. Because there are probably some things on that list from Acts chapter 2 that we don't do as well for each other, and we need to be very mindful of that. Somebody else? Who would share what it's like to be a church of neighbors? What we could be together?
I always get nervous when I talk too, so. Just last few weeks, I was able to take on a new job that I've been very fortunate to do, and something I have a passion for. So I have like one more week of my job that I've been at for 9 years, and prayed a lot for it, and I've looked at several opportunities to go to bigger and better places for jobs the last few years, and they just haven't worked out, and so we just kind of set it aside and didn't think, all right, I'm just happy with where we're at. And a couple weeks ago I accepted a new job, and before I even, it was just kind of mind blowing. They came to me, and it's nice to be wanted for a job. So I'm very happy with that, to be able to help more around our house, for our family, full benefits, all that good stuff. But in the meantime, where I do work, I am separated from the main part of the store I work at, and it's not a very positive part of management. And I have a good friend that I call Rookie, that I've kind of taken in as a big brother. And he just has the hardest time with one of the managers there. And I still have 1 full week at my other job, and he's just seen how much how excited I am for this new job to go into, and he's talked to me about it, and he's like, I need to find something, and I need to find something. And so I just happened to, there was something on Facebook, you got to share, you share things, I just threw it out. I thought I sent it to him personally, as the new place I'm going to is hiring. And so I just kind of sent it. I thought I sent it to him in a personal message, and I sent it right to his Facebook, where a bunch of other people seen it, and and I didn't know it. He went and filled out an application, and my boss, it will be my new boss, called me instantly and said, how do you like this guy? How do you, and I said, I told him since day one when I interviewed, and I told the new guy where I'm going, I said, if I could take anybody with me, it'd be the 2 guys I work with the closest. And he pretty much hired him on the spot over the phone without even interviewing him. And he's just an awesome guy, and he doesn't get a chance to go to church because they work on they work a lot of rotating Sundays, so he doesn't get that chance. And when they do, he's with the family. But I just told him, I said, man, I pray for you. I mean, I don't ever do that. I don't say that. That's me. It's just, I'm not that type of guy to say that kind of stuff. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, man, I'm like, I don't do that. I don't do that. I'm just, that's, at least I don't tell people I do that. And we talked. I talked to Shannon. I said, and Tom, Rookie, he said, I said, he's like, well, thanks. He's like, I said, yeah. I said, something's just changed just the last few weeks, just at home. I think more of the work atmosphere. I said, man, I can't wait. I said, if I didn't have to give my 2 weeks and take a week vacation, I would have took all 3 and just said, I'm done. But I couldn't do that. So, and he's just like, well, what's the difference? I'm like, I don't know. I said, I just feel. And we talked about church, and he said it before I did. He's like, you're more churchy than you probably are in public than you are at church. And that's how I said the same thing to Shannon. We talked about it. She said, I think the same thing too. But he's had a hard time with so much negativity leaving where he's at, and then they gave him a position to take over for where I'm at, and we talked things over, and now he had a big change of heart, and now he'll be going to where I go. And we were hired just from word of mouth, from based on personalities, pretty much. Like I said, I don't, I called him, and after he had a real hard day at work, I'm like, do you want to talk? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, I was going to stay at the hardware until I talked with you. He's like, I can't. It's just too much negativity. And he's like, I need to go where I'm wanted. And he was wanted over the phone is how he got the job. So I just feel, it was almost like I would have rather, and I told Scott, if it wasn't, if I didn't want to move on so much, I would have told you to hire him before me. And I just I don't know. It's just something has changed, and even I have had some hard feelings from a contractor that worked on our house a few years ago, and I haven't talked to him in like 2.5 years, and I stopped him in the hardware the other day, and just face to face, just I took the stuff out of his hands and I put it down, and I said I just wanted to bury the hatchet. No hard feeling, you know. You can forgive, but I won't forget. But and I just, you know, he didn't know what to say, and it just felt, you know, just I don't know, something just told me to do it now and just be done with it. And I just feel like that was the negativity I had, is just like everything's been just like lifted off of me. So, so
Thank you, Jeff.
thank you.
Yeah. I think we probably have time for one more. If you want to, anybody want to do something short? Because then I'm going to wrap this up. And what's it like to try to live as a neighborly church? What's that like? Part of what should be happening is you should feel your spiritual eyes widening and opening to what could be. This is, we talk about sometimes in organizations or churches, the word vision. What's your vision? What could be? What does it look like for us to be this kind of neighborly church full of people like Jeff and Jana who shared today, who live out neighborly love in their lives? What could it be? Somebody have a story of what it's like to be neighborly to each other that you'd share?
Is my mic on? I can talk.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Andy.
You would think, bringing a meal to somebody, but it like brings such great joy to them when you do, which is why more people should sign up and get involved, because we need you. But it's something that I've seen over the years, and even when people reach out for people outside of our church and you bring them a meal, whether it's something that you have made or you picked up a frozen lasagna or whatever, it's amazing what a simple act like that can do for somebody, and in whatever the reason is they have that need, that simple act can make a big difference. And so I've seen a lot of joy and loving your neighbor through that team. So
Fantastic. Thank you, Amy. All right, so let me wrap up. And then I got to do a little logistical adjustment on the fly because you guys shared so well. The reason this candle is lit in the middle, if you've been here for either of the last 2 Sundays, you know, this is one of the key biblical symbols for God's Spirit, who is always with us. He is with us here now. He was with you as you shared. He was with me as I taught. He was in you as you heard the truth of Jesus proclaimed, and then you feeling like you needed to do something about it, or you were thankful for it. We believe that God's Spirit is going to continue to lead us to obey and follow this neighborly love idea toward each other more and more. And whatever we have done together, and however beautiful it has been, we can even do more. We can do better. And more of us will have stories like you heard today. And the idea of being each other's neighbors will stop being a concept and will start being our reality that we know and that we love. This is what we hope. And what we're going to do over the next few months together is work on pieces of our church's life where maybe we don't do this particularly well. You're going to hear about one of them next week. We need to talk about it so that we can do even better at this neighborly love mission that Jesus has left us. So here's the logistical part, and this is for the band and the guys in the back. We're going to cut some pieces, and I'll come tell you what in just a second. So we're actually going to do the offering right now. So if those who are going to collect it would prepare to do so, and we're going to sing together. Remember, you can also turn in those white slips right now. If you're a guest, don't feel any pressure to give. This is how those of us who call RiverTree home support the work and life of our church. Would you stand and let's sing together?
The splendor of the King, the splendor